My sister was cherished, while I was seen as the odd one out. Now I was deliberately left out of Thanksgiving by my own family. My name is Eli and I'm 27 years old. For much of my life, I felt like the background figure in my own family. Not despised, but tolerated. My sister Haley was the golden kid, my mother's mini-me, with great grades, the perfect fiancé, and everything. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the artist, and the one who, according to my Uncle Frank, never quite matured. He said that a lot. Uncle Frank is one of those individuals who behaves like a comedy dad but lacks the charm. Loud, opinionated, enjoys grilling and controlling others around him. Each year, he hosts Thanksgiving, and I drag myself there every year because it's tradition, right? This year seemed different. I had not heard anything about the meal, no invitation, no family group text, not even a vague, guilt-inducing reminder from my mother. At first I assumed they expected me to show up as usual. But then I saw photographs on Haley's Instagram showing the long table all set, the turkey sliced, and everyone dressed up and laughing. It was obviously planned. I stared at the photo for a long time, wondering if it was a mistake. Maybe the invitation was lost. Perhaps they simply forgot to push send. I gave myself every reason to assume it wasn't what it seemed. But a part of me knew. Still, I got into my car and drove to Uncle Frank's house. It was just 20 minutes away and I told myself that if I was mistaken and everything was just a misunderstanding, I'd laugh it off and sit down as if nothing had happened. But the moment I got into the driveway, the freezing air outside felt warmer than what awaited me. Uncle Frank greeted me at the edge of the driveway. He didn't even wait till I got out of the car. He simply walked up, arms crossed over his beer belly, sporting that smug little grin he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. "You weren't invited, Eli," he replied casually, like we were talking about the weather. "Go home." I didn't say anything at first, I just gazed past him, toward the home. Through the large window I could see everyone. My mother was at the head of the table laughing. Haley is next to her scrolling through her phone. Even my best friend Kyle, whom I grew up with and who usually spends the holidays bouncing between my house and his father's, was there, lifting a glass like he belonged. None of them looked at the window. They had no idea I was standing just yards away from a celebration I was definitely not meant to be a part of. I nodded once and didn't protest or seek an explanation. I simply turned, returned to my car, and drove a short distance down the road to the nearest gas station parking lot. I parked, rested my face against the steering wheel, and let the silence consume me. Then I placed one call. Not a dramatic one, no secret agent, lawyer, or anything like that. Just a genuine friend. The kind of buddy that understands how messy your family is, and never tries to talk you out of feeling wounded by it. We'd done a few side projects together, largely graphic design and back-end stuff. But more. Importantly, she was the manager of a rather prominent social media website, Holiday Nightmares, which happened to be running a feature that week. "Tell us your tale." I told her everything. Not out of rage or vengeance, but just to reveal the truth. I told her about the lack of an invitation, Uncle Frank meeting me in the driveway, seeing my mother and sister and Kyle giggling inside. I didn't name people and instead told the story honestly. She remained quiet the entire time. Then she asked, "I think this fits the theme perfectly. Are you okay with me posting it anonymously?" I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said. "Go ahead." 20 minutes later, my phone started vibrating. First it was Kyle, then Haley, and finally my mother. Missed calls and texts piled up like a busted dam. The post had gone viral faster than I had anticipated. It struck a nerve. People connected with it. Thousands of strangers responded with amazement, pity, and anecdotes about their own families turning cold. I hadn't even opened Instagram or Facebook yet, but I could already tell what was going on. Finally, Uncle Frank called. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat in my car and watched the notifications come in one after another. There was something surreal about it. This undetectable shift in power. This was the point at which I was no longer just a background figure. For the first time I wasn't quietly accepting the blow. I was not the bigger person. I wasn't trying to comprehend folks who obviously didn't care if I was present or not. I just finished. The calls kept coming. The phone rang again. "Mom." I let it go to voicemail before calling Haley and Kyle again. I set it to quiet and sat there, simply breathing. And then I saw a message. I received a DM request from someone I didn't know but had a familiar last name. It was a cousin I had not spoken to in years. One who moved away after a disagreement with Uncle Frank about money. The message was short. "Good for you. I've been waiting for someone to finally express it." And that's when I knew this was about more than simply being left out of one's supper. It was never simply about the invitation. It was about the years of silence, the years of suppressing my emotions so I wouldn't be troublesome. It was about all the family moments I had smiled through despite feeling invisible. And suddenly, people were paying attention. Not just strangers on the internet, but individuals who believed I'd never be able to stand up for myself. But it wasn't even about standing anymore. It was about going away. They weren't prepared for that. They were not prepared for what occurred next. By the time I returned to my flat, it was dark. The leftovers I had prepared for myself earlier that morning, just in case, were still in the refrigerator. Turkey sandwich, cranberry sauce, and store-bought pie. I heated them up, sat on the couch, and ate in silence, allowing my phone to buzz across the counter like a faraway alarm that I didn't need to answer. I only looked at the post once on my friend's page. The remarks came in faster than I could read. People shared their own horrific stories. It happened to me last year. I still haven't spoken to my relatives. I sobbed when reading this. Thank you for stating so. Families like this do not deserve your silence. Good for you. I wasn't looking for validation, yet it felt like a warm blanket. For the first time, I wasn't doing this alone. Then followed the group message. At 8:52 p.m., the old family group chat, which had been dormant for weeks, came alive. Mom, Eli, please call me. Haley, what have you done? Kyle. Dude, this is getting out of control. Uncle Frank, take down that post right now. Do you want to air filthy laundry? Fine, but you're dragging the entire family through the muck. I did not respond. Not right away. I needed time. I needed to let the weight of it all settle because for once, they were the ones writhing, and I wasn't going to rush to clean up the mess they had made. Around 9:30, my mother called again. There was no voicemail this time, only quiet when I didn't answer. Then at 9:43, she sent a text that caught me off guard. Mom, we did not intend to hurt you. Frank mentioned that you were traveling. I assumed you didn't want to come this year. That prevented me from traveling. Nobody had asked. Nobody had checked. I'd been living 10 miles away all year. I hadn't even mentioned going out of town. It was a falsehood. A cover-up. When someone asked about my absence, Frank most likely stated something to explain it. I wasn't sure what hurt more. Being excluded or discovering they'd made up a tale about why I wasn't there without even asking if I wanted to be. Kyle texted, Kyle man, I didn't know. I swear I thought you were working or something. Your mom said you'd canceled. I shouldn't have believed her. I'm sorry. It was weak, but it felt semi-honest. Kyle and I had been friends since sixth school. We had gone through a lot. Video game marathons, high school breakups, and even a disastrous college road trip that left both of us sleeping in a Walmart parking lot. He had been wandering lately though. More dinners with Haley, and more laughs with Uncle Frank. I attributed it to aging, but it could have been anything more. Perhaps he had begun to accept the version of me they told themselves, the one who was untrustworthy, sensitive, and an outsider. Still, I did not answer. I needed them to sit in it for a little longer. At 10:12 p.m., the message was taken up by a larger, national-level page. My friend messaged me in all caps. Dude, 40,000 shares in an hour. It's everywhere. And she was correct. I checked Twitter, and there were screenshots and threads. People were analyzing the dynamics, manipulation, and entitlement. They were guessing about the family roles as if it were a psychological crime scene. Some even tried to figure out who I was, but I remained anonymous, staring from behind the glass like someone viewing a fire that didn't need to be extinguished. That's when the emails started arriving. An HR representative from a technology company for which I had freelanced. A previous teacher. An old roommate. Folks who recognized the tone but not the specifics. One line from a woman I hadn't spoken with in years stood out. I've always wondered how you remained so silent at those parties. Now I understand. You were drowning. Haley called at 11 o'clock. I didn't respond. She tried again and again, eventually sending a wall of text so long that I had to scroll twice to finish it. She said I was overreacting, that I could have just texted her, that I'd blown everything up over one supper, that I was embarrassing the family, that Uncle Frank's clients were calling him with inquiries, and that their neighbors were wondering what had happened. I read the message twice, and then once more, and at the end, I chuckled quietly, bitterly, because she never asked how I felt in all those words. Not once did she apologize. It was not about me getting hurt. It was about them feeling uncomfortable. The thing about quiet is that it accumulates like pressure in a pipe. You have no idea how close it is to bursting until the entire thing floods. That piece, that single anecdote, was the tipping point for me. And now, everyone who has ever dismissed me or encouraged me to be a larger person is watching me become someone they can't ignore. And I hadn't even mentioned their names. That was the part that terrified them the most. The power of remaining nameless while being right. At 11:47, my phone buzzed again. I received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't respond, but something compelled me to touch accept. A woman's voice broke through, frightened and almost trembling. "Hello, is this Eli? Who is this?" "My name is Claire." I am Frank's daughter." I froze. Claire is his daughter from his first marriage. He barely mentioned this one. He hadn't invited this person to Thanksgiving in years. "I saw the post," she explained, "and I believe we need to discuss." And that's when things changed. Where the story ceased being just mine, and the past began to crumble faster than I'd anticipated. I sat there, startled. I hadn't heard Claire's name in over a decade. Uncle Frank never mentioned her until someone else did, and even then, it was with an odd mix of hate and fake indifference. She made her choice. He had previously stated. When I asked why she wasn't at Christmas, that was the whole explanation. No follow-up, no curiosity, just cold dismissal, but here she was on the phone with me. "I didn't know if I should call," she replied with a low voice. "But once I saw the post, I knew it was you. I don't know how you wrote it, but I just knew." I didn't know what to say. There was something haunting about hearing from her, like a ghost of family past suddenly stepping into the present. She hadn't just disappeared, she'd been erased, but her voice sounded warm, even familiar. "I'm guessing you saw how quickly it spread," I said finally, just to say something. She gave a short, sad laugh. "Yeah, I saw. It's blowing up. And I've been reading the comments all night. The whole thing just hit me hard." There was a pause. Not awkward, just heavy. "You know what really messed me up?" she said. "I thought I was the only one. That cracked something in me." "I thought I was," I admitted, and just like that the wall I'd built up all day, anger, detachment, all of it started to shift because for so long I thought that maybe I was too sensitive, too distant, too unwilling to let things go, that maybe I didn't belong, but now here was someone else from the same family tree telling me she felt the same way. "Do you have time to talk?" she asked. "I don't want to dump all this on you, but there's stuff I've never said out loud before." I looked at the clock. Midnight. I was supposed to be sleeping. I had work in the morning, but none of that mattered. "Yeah," I said. "I've got time," so we talked for hours. She told me about how Frank used to pit her against her mom, how he'd throw money at problems and then yank it away just to remind her who held the leash, how he'd tell everyone she was difficult, ungrateful and spoiled, when in reality, she just started asking questions he didn't want to answer. She talked about how when she turned 21, he cut her off completely and told the rest of the family she'd moved on. She hadn't. She just stopped fighting to be seen. And then she said something I'll never forget. "He taught me to believe that being silent was the price of keeping the peace, but it never bought me peace. It only made him comfortable." I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my upper lip. It was as if everything I'd never said had found a voice in her, and it wasn't just about Frank. It was my mother sweeping things under the rug, Haley laughing along with the jokes, and Kyle, my so-called best friend, sitting at that table like it was any other Thursday. Claire and I talked until nearly 3 a.m., and by the end, I felt lighter, not healed, but understood, as if someone had opened a locked door inside my chest and let fresh air in. Before we hung up, she said, "If you ever need help telling more of the truth, I'm in. Seriously. You're not alone in this." That was the moment I knew this wasn't going to end with one post. I finally got a few hours of sleep, and when I woke up, everything had escalated. Requests from journalists, podcast offers, and someone from a documentary series asking if I'd speak on camera anonymously if I wanted. My name hadn't been released, but others were beginning to piece it together, extended family members, old friends, and acquaintances. Some reached out simply to say, "I think I know who that was, and I believe you." Others weren't so nice. Around lunchtime I received a text from Frank's wife, Aunt Linda. "Aunt Linda, you're ruining lives over one dinner." Eli. "Was that your plan? To humiliate everyone publicly? You were always dramatic." I stared at the message for a while, the girl of it, the projection. That's when I realized the real reason they were panicking. They weren't worried about the post being mean or inappropriate. They were worried about how it would be received. That people believed it, that strangers, thousands of them, recognized the kind of manipulation and cruelty they'd spent years disguising as family tradition, and that image was everything in their world, so I started pulling receipts. I wasn't planning to go public yet, but I began gathering screenshots, texts, voicemails, things I'd let slide, things I'd ignored to keep the peace. The time Haley forwarded a family vacation invite to everyone but me. The message from Mom telling me not to make a scene at Christmas because Frank wasn't in the mood for attitude, and the audio clip of Uncle Frank telling me at my college graduation dinner that graphic design isn't a real job. I was slowly putting together a timeline, a record. Because I wasn't going to let them twist the story this time, something unexpected happened. A knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My apartment building had a buzzer, and I hadn't heard it go off, but there it was, 3 sharp knocks right around 3:15 p.m. I froze. 1,000 possibilities flashing through my mind. I walked slowly to the door, my heart pounding, and looked through the peephole. What I saw made my stomach drop. It was my mother, and she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, arms crossed, was Uncle Frank. I didn't open the door right away. I just stood there watching through the peephole as my mother fidgeted with the strap of her purse and Uncle Frank paced like a lion in a cage. After deciding I didn't exist on Thanksgiving, my fingers curled into fists at my sides, but I wasn't going to give them the upper hand again, so I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack, keeping the chain latched. "What do you want?" Mom's eyes widened, as if she hadn't expected me to sound so cold. "Eli, sweetheart, can we come in? We just want to talk." Frank snorted behind her. "We wouldn't have to talk if you hadn't made that ridiculous post. You could have just picked up the phone." My voice remained steady. "You could have invited me." He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "You know what? No. You're not coming in. Say whatever you need to say right here." Mom looked hurt. "Eli, please don't do this. This isn't you." I raised my eyebrows. "Is it me? You mean it's not the version of me you're used to? The one who smiles through everything and pretends everything is fine?" "Yeah, I'm done being that guy." Frank stepped forward. But I shut the door a little tighter so he couldn't see my face clearly. "We've been getting calls, Eli," he said sharply. "People are asking questions. My business partner saw the post. Linda is crying in the guest room. You've turned us into a public spectacle." "No," I replied quietly. "You did that?" "I just told the truth." Mom's voice cracked. "Do you really think we did this to hurt you? You've always been so sensitive. We thought you didn't want to come this year. Frank said you mentioned something about being busy, but I never said that." I cut in. "None of you even asked. You assumed. Or worse, you lied. Because it was easier to pretend I didn't matter than to deal with the discomfort of inviting someone you all treat like a burden." They were both silent for a beat before Frank let out a sharp laugh. "You're acting like some kind of martyr," he sneered. "You're not the only one with problems, Eli. Grow up." And that was it. That was the sentence that broke the last fragile thread of empathy I had left. I slammed the door shut, not hard, but with finality, and locked the deadbolt. I stood there for a moment, listening to them mutter on the other side. I heard Mom say something like, "He's not thinking straight." And Frank cursed under his breath before their footsteps faded. I didn't move. I just leaned against the door and breathed. Not long after, my phone buzzed again. "Haley this time." "Haley, what are you doing? Why is Mom sobbing? You need to fix this, Eli." I didn't respond because the full ripple effect had already begun and my post had spread from social media to news aggregators. A few journalists picked it up and wrote anonymous op-eds about holiday exclusion and family dynamics. One even compared it to the concept of emotional scapegoating, which is how families often use one member as a dumping ground for their dysfunction, then act surprised when that person finally walks away. People were talking, and not just strangers. Over the next few days I got more messages from extended family, cousins, great aunts, and even people I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Some just wrote short notes, "I'm proud of you," while others sent paragraphs telling me about their own versions of Thanksgiving betrayal. I even got a message from my father's sister, who hadn't spoken to my mother in years. She wrote, "I've always thought you were odd. I realize you were just surviving." That word surviving remained with me since it described what I had been doing for years. Not living. Not prospering. Simply surviving in a family that saw me as useful when I was quiet, helpful, and non-confrontational. But now that I had spoken up, they weren't sure what to do with me. A week has gone by. I blocked Frank. I turned Haley's volume down. I ignored Kyle's frequent texts, all versions of, "Can we talk?" I didn't know Guy, since at that time I didn't care if they knew or not. It was too little. Too late. But I did not separate myself. Claire and I remained in touch. We met for coffee a few days later, and it was incredible how quickly we connected. We spoke for 3 hours straight. She told me more about the family I'd never met, about how subtle people like Frank warped the story, how they put people against one another so no one compares notes. She even showed me older emails. Frank's emails to her mother were full of threats and ultimatums. One line jumped out to me more than the others. Eli is taking the same way. Soft and feeble. He won't make it unless someone corrects him. I stared at those remarks for a long time because they weren't simply cruel. That was premeditated. He had been training the rest of the family to believe the worst about me long before I was aware of it. Gaslighting on a familial level, undermining me in subtle ways so that when I finally pushed back it would appear that I was the one overreacting. It wasn't paranoia, but a pattern. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I received a handwritten letter in the mail, with no return address, and only my name on the envelope. It was from Mom. I slowly opened it, expecting a cunning guilt trip. But what I discovered was different. It was short, only 2 paragraphs. But the tone was calmer, not apologetic, but reflective. She stated, "I read everything. I read the comments. I read what others said about mothers like me. I was enraged at first. But then, I remembered your face when you were a boy. How you used to shrink when people raised their voices, and how you learned to disappear into corners. I didn't protect you. I let others define you, and I stood by while it happened. I didn't think I was doing you any harm, but silence is also a form of harm. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I see it now. I'm sorry." I stared at that letter for a long time. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Not by itself. But it was something. And for the first time in years, it felt like someone in my family had actually seen me. Christmas came and went, and I didn't go home. Instead, I spent it with Claire and a few friends who had also chosen to spend the holiday away from their families. We ate takeout, played board games, and watched cheesy movies on Netflix. There was no drama, no guilt, just laughter and genuine connection, the kind I used to believe only happened in movies. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't vindictive, it was just peaceful. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. I didn't need their approval. I had the truth on my side, and people who finally believed me. So, when New Year's rolled around, I wrote something of my own, a follow-up post, with no names, no accusations, just a reflection on boundaries, how families can love you while still hurting you, and how walking away doesn't mean you've failed. The post didn't go viral like the first one, but that wasn't the point. It reached the people it needed to reach, including me, and, I believe, my mother. Uncle Frank never contacted me again, and Haley eventually sent a genuine, albeit brief apology. We're not close, but we're cordial now. Kyle and I talked once and I told him I wished him well, but I didn't want to rebuild something I couldn't trust, which was fine because I had new traditions now. The next year, I hosted a small, quiet, laughter-filled Thanksgiving dinner. Claire and a few friends came, and no one raised their voices. Nobody made jokes at the expense of others, and when someone spilled cranberry sauce on the couch, we laughed and resumed eating. No one was left outside the door, and no one was told to leave. As I glanced around the room, I understood that's how a family should feel.